good old Path of Exile.
Okay, my friend.
There's over 600 passives available to choose from.
So, my friends, let's go now. We are there. It's gonna happen now. Let's go.
I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games. Thanks for joining us today as we reveal Path of
Hello,
Exile's
my
next
friend.
expansion, Sentinel, which launches on PC and Mac on May 13th and on Xbox and PlayStation on May 18th. Twitch drops are enabled for today's live stream, so make sure you follow the instructions below to link your account and earn
Is
your
it better
rapture
now?
wings.
The wings are amazing,
In
bros.
February, we launched Siege of the Atlas, an expansion that drastically changed Path of Exile's mapping endgame. It removed Atlas regions and watchstones and introduced the gigantic Atlas-wide passive tree.
Amazing,
and 4 new
bro.
Pinnacle bosses to challenge.
Was the best.
One other very important aspect of the new endgame is its modularity. We designed it in a way where it's easy to expand with more content, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Alongside the Sentinel Challenge League, this expansion doubles down on the best parts of Siege of the Atlas to give you ultimate control over your endgame experience.
I love that control. More control.
Here's what you can expect from today's livestream. We'll start with a trailer for the Sentinel expansion.
Trailer, okay.
And then we'll go through its content and features in
Okay.
detail, starting with how the new Sentinel Challenge League lets you control your level of risk and reward. We'll then move on to the improvements we have made to Path of Exile's endgame. We'll discuss modifications to the Atlas-wide passive tree, the introduction of 20 Atlas Keystone passives, new variations on Pinnacle boss fights, and powerful unique items designed by the winners of our Siege of the Atlas boss kill event. Following that, we'll discuss the type of balance changes we're making, or more interestingly, not making in this expansion.
Okay, some nerfs,
We'll
some
then
buffs.
cover what we're doing with magic and rare monster modifiers, various quality of life improvements,
Nice
and the
quality
full
of life.
release of controller support for PC players. After showing you our latest supporter packs, I'll head into a live Q&A with community streamer Ziggy D, where we'll answer your questions.
Okay, bros.
Once that
Let's
finishes,
go.
we'll post the expansion's full patch notes. There's a lot to cover, so let's roll the trailer for Sentinel.
Let's go, bro. We want to see that. Let's go. It's gonna happen. It's now, bros. Come on, bro. Be a good leak.
In the wake of your power, something has arisen. Dark sentinels, hungry for a share.
I told you with the colors.
But these cruel constructs can be harnessed. Take them, bind them to your will.
Okay. There's some jewels or so.
Test and tinker, combine and reconfigure. And together, you will find your fortune.
Okay. Can choose
Some
between the
sentinels
colors.
are powerful. Others are dangerous.
Reward types.
But in a world with shifting stars, monstrous new threats,
Oh my god.
and
Okay.
valuable treasures,
Okay.
you will need them.
What? Ooh, the
Sentinels
bosses are
await
stronger.
your command.
The bosses are stronger, broskis. Okay. I've made the bosses, also the Exarch and stuff, the upper
I'm sure you have a
version
lot
of
of
it.
questions, so let's get started with a full explanation of the upcoming Sentinel Challenge League. Sentinels are ancient constructs that have been unearthed across Rayclast. In this league, you will collect these Sentinels and attempt to harness their great power. But this symbiosis is not without risks. Once deployed, a Sentinel follows you, watching and waiting for you to enter combat. As you encounter enemies, the Sentinel will fire a beam that doesn't damage the enemy, but rather empowers them.
Makes
This
them
not only
stronger.
amplifies the difficulty of the foe, but also the rewards that it yields.
Amazing.
There are 3 classes of Sentinels that you will find as you kill monsters in this league. Stalker Sentinels will follow you for around 30 seconds, empowering dozens of monsters before they dissipate. This is like a build your own breach or delirium effect, because you control what monsters you're fighting when you deploy the Sentinel, and through various means that we'll describe shortly, you're also in control of how much the monsters are empowered. In contrast to Stalker Sentinels, Pandemonium Sentinels are designed for mass area of effect, and typically only fire one shot. But this shot really counts, chaining between monsters to affect an entire screen full of foes at once. This class of Sentinel can be very dangerous because it empowers so many enemies at one time. The final class, Apex Sentinels, can only empower rare or unique enemies. They fire fewer shots but have a much larger impact on difficulty and reward. You start with a single slot to equip a Stalker Sentinel,
And you
but
can
as you
get
play
3.
through the league, you can eventually unlock 2 more Sentinel slots so that you can have 1 Sentinel of each class equipped at a time. Each class of Sentinel can be deployed only once per area that you play. You'll quickly develop various strategies for when each class of Sentinel is best used. For example, saving your Pandemonium Sentinel for when you're surrounded by monsters, or using your Apex Sentinel on the map boss or league content that spawns several rare monsters.
Alright, I see.
With
The
full
yellow
load of
is
the
for
Sentinels
bosses.
equipped, in every map you'll get to empower bosses of your choice, juice up an entire screen at once with a button press, and choose the part of the map where it's best to empower a series of dozens of monsters.
You have to taunt the whole map
Sentinels
and then
cannot be damaged
activate
by
red.
monsters in combat, but do gradually deplete their internal power supply each time you use them. They can be found as you play and are incompatible with traditional Rayclastian crafting techniques. However, new Sentinels with different properties can be assembled from the depleted husks of others that you have used until their internal power supplies ran out. We'll explain that crafting process in more detail later on. You can find magic Sentinels that have mods on them. These mods can augment the base properties of a Sentinel, extending its duration, making it empower monsters faster, increasing the number it can empower, or even the degree to which the monsters are empowered, affecting both their difficulty and rewards. Some mods will add specific drops such as currency items, essences, or unique items to monsters empowered by the Sentinel, but at the cost of increasing how difficult the monster is to defeat.
Nice.
You can also occasionally find rare Sentinels that have more than 2 mods on them. These are generally quite a lot more powerful than normal or magic Sentinels if you find the right combination of
And
mods.
unique ones, I'm pretty sure, no?
The Sentinels you find as you explore Rayclast will become more powerful. Some particularly powerful ones with special properties can only come from the process of assembling new Sentinels from depleted ones. While the Sentinels you find generally get better and better as you play through the league, you can also upgrade the behavior and properties of Sentinels through your Sentinel Controller. The Sentinel Controller is like a runic circuit board. It's what powers your Sentinels and allows you to customize them. There are specific nodes for each of the 3 types of Sentinel, so you can customize the properties and behavior of all of them, or potentially focus on your favorite base types.
So all on one, you will have to.
As you play through the league and kill more and more enemies affected by your Sentinels, your controller will gain power. You start with 4 units, which is enough to power your first Sentinel slot and your first runic node. By the end game, you are able to work up to 30 power units, which is enough for almost half of the controller to be powered at once.
Okay.
So how do you choose which runic nodes to power? You do this by connecting them together with filaments. Power flows from the top of the circuit through the filaments until it is all in use by the nodes you have connected. You can set up filaments in advance and they'll automatically be used as more power becomes available.
Okay.
Moving filaments around has no cost. It's basically like a planning tool that gradually gets activated as you gain more power throughout the league. So you're not locked into a specific plan and you can respec for free at any time.
Ah, nice.
Some powerful
It's
runic
good.
nodes require 2 filaments and hence
AOST.
allocate more of your power when activated.
That's nice.
Additional Sentinel slots for other types like Pandemonium and Apex Sentinels, for example, require 3 filaments and hence 3 power units each. While it's almost always best to have all 3 slots powered so you can use all 3 Sentinels per area, there are niche strategies where you want to unpower specific Sentinel slots in order to have more power for additional runic nodes. Also that you can fully specialize in just 1 or 2 Sentinel
Exactly.
types.
I would only for one.
Just to
but
reiterate, you can change your allocation as much as you like, so feel free to experiment.
yeah, you can experiment without costs.
This
That's
powerful
amazing.
runic node allows Pandemonium Sentinels to be used in an
Should be
additional
the same
time
on
each
the
area.
trees.
While this is basically pure upside, you should definitely plan around the fact that you'll be running their charge down pretty quickly if you use this node. This runic node prevents your Stalker Sentinels from empowering normal rarity enemies. While this seems very powerful at first because you'll just be empowering magic, rare, or unique enemies that benefit greatly from the boost to item drops, you should be aware that unless you have a large source of special enemies, you'll be fighting against the flight duration of your Sentinels and will probably want to build around increasing their duration. While the Sentinel Controller lets you specialize how the different classes of Sentinels behave, it's generally not necessary to have to modify it for each new Sentinel that you equip. The runic nodes you have chosen represent your overall strategy for each class of Sentinel and rarely need to be tweaked if you swap one Sentinel for another. As you use Sentinels in combat across a number of maps, they eventually run out of charge and will become depleted, but they don't need to be thrown away when this occurs. You can find power cores that let you assemble a new Sentinel with a full charge.
Ah, nice.
This
Okay.
process disassembles two existing Sentinels and creates a hybrid of the two, with their properties combined together. Right-clicking a power core opens up an assembly screen. If you
And then you
insert
can
two
combine.
Sentinels and click the Assemble button, a new, fully charged one will be created.
Okay.
This process is a complex and unpredictable one that can either inherit properties from the input Sentinels or potentially produce new ones that weren't based on either of them. For example, the base type of the Sentinel could either be the left input Sentinel, the right input Sentinel, or an entirely new one that can't spawn naturally and can only come from this process.
Okay, that's RNG actually a bit.
The same applies to its modifiers. You generally get a mix of modifiers from the two input Sentinels, but sometimes they have their tiers upgraded or entirely new mods added, occasionally including ones that are exclusive to the assembly process. The end result is that you're usually getting Sentinels that are similar in function to the depleted ones you have combined, but occasionally
Chance for
mutate in
rewards
new
to be
ways,
doubled.
producing results that unlock more power and possibilities. The best Sentinels in the game will come from lucky combinations of depleted Sentinels that have just the right mods. It's
Show us
also
the
possible
best.
to assemble two Sentinels directly into one of the many valuable unique Sentinels.
Ah, unique, I told you. But 60 to 20 currency rewards.
Specialized power cores exist, which influence the assembly process to greatly increase the chances of various interesting outcomes occurring. They don't guarantee anything, but are absolutely worth considering if you're trying to hit unlikely assembly results. You may want to accumulate a small collection of depleted Sentinels so that you have options to assemble together. That's where the Sentinel Locker comes in. It's a free object that you can place in your hideout that allows you to store stacks of each of the Sentinel currency items, as well as a tab full of each of the 3 categories of Sentinel.
Nice.
You can also store
New tab.
Sentinels in regular stash tabs, and they can be freely traded with other players. The Sentinel Locker's affinity for Sentinels will also work with regular stash tabs while this league is active. As I hinted at before, you can find or create unique Sentinels. These have powerful static properties, but because they cannot be combined with other Sentinels, there's no way to recharge them once they become depleted. They are essentially limited use items with powerful effects. Let's look at a few examples. First off, we have the Basilisk. This is a Pandemonium Sentinel that augments its wide area of effect blast with a petrification effect. Any monsters caught in the blast are turned to stone. Rather than being primarily useful for raising the risk and reward of combat like other Sentinels, this one is incredibly useful as an emergency button in combat. By activating the Basilisk, you can freeze most of the monsters around you in place, letting you take control of dangerous situations. This unique Sentinel, the Hollow-Eyed Skull, is basically a headhunter in Sentinel form.
Ah, yes. They gain its modifiers for
There are
20
also a set
seconds.
of unique Sentinels that are designed
Like
to
the
empower
Headhunter.
specific named Atlas map bosses. If you activate one of these Sentinels while fighting that boss, it empowers the boss into an extremely dangerous version that is very, very rewarding if you can defeat
Yeah,
it.
16 currency
The highly
rewards.
empowered boss fight is further scaled by whatever mods are on the map that contain it, so you'll want to be pretty careful with what mods you choose to use. On the other hand, its rewards are scaled by reward bonuses on that map, so if you're able to defeat one of these bosses in a juiced map, you will certainly be greatly rewarded.
Greatly, yeah, Divine
These
Orb,
highly
it's
empowered
okay.
map bosses are the best source of recombinators, a new type of endgame currency item that can be found in the Sentinel League. Recombinators allow you to apply the Sentinel assembly process to 2 pieces of equipment of the same item class, combining them together in unpredictable ways. This process can also rarely imbue your items with exclusive modifiers that don't normally spawn on that type of item. While the recombination process involves significant risks, you could combine the best parts of 2 rare items together, maybe getting a lucky exclusive mod spawn, and end up with one of the best weapons, armor pieces, or jewelry in Path of Exile. Sentinels can be
Alright.
deployed while engaging in other League content, so you can juice the risk and reward to quite crazy levels. For example, you could enter a Mirror of Delirium, trigger a breach, and deploy your Sentinel at the same time, causing the monsters to have 3 significant modifiers to both their difficulty and rewards.
Ah, the rat you're
There
taking
are only a few specific
for
areas
mapping.
that Sentinels can't be deployed in, mostly for technical reasons, and those are unique maps, Pinnacle Atlas bosses, and the Simulacrum. So that's Sentinel in a nutshell. It's a combat league that gives you heaps of control over the exact risk and reward you encounter, It stacks with other combat-enhancing league mechanics,
That's not
chooses
bad.
your endgame bosses beyond any kind of reasonable difficulty, lets you play with temporary headhunters, and might even let a few players assemble some pretty insane rare items if they're lucky. We're very much looking forward to seeing your stories after you've had a chance to play with it next week.
I like that. That you
In
can go
addition
on.
to the Sentinel Challenge League, this expansion further improves on the new endgame introduced in Siege of the Atlas, its Atlas-wide passive tree and Pinnacle boss fights. The new endgame was designed to give you ultimate control over what kind of content you want to play and how difficult and rewarding you want it to be. With the Sentinel expansion, we are doubling down on what makes this new endgame the best one that Path of Exile has ever had.
All right.
This expansion introduces 20 powerful Keystone passives to the Atlas tree. As you know from the regular passive skill tree, Keystone passives are usually dramatic and build-changing, with both upsides and potential downsides. Each Keystone can completely change the way you play Path of Exile's endgame, and we have designed Keystone passives for many different playstyles and situations.
I like this one with the currency.
The second big change is that we have introduced these clusters of passives that grant you even more control over what endgame content you encounter. As you know, you can encounter many different types
Nice.
of past League content randomly.
Nice.
within
I hate
maps.
Legion, for example.
These new passives allow you to prevent content you don't enjoy from appearing randomly, while
So that-
simultaneously causing other content to spawn at a higher rate.
I love that.
Aside from the obvious convenience of only encountering the past League mechanics that you choose, the system is great for target farming specific content that you have used on
Amazing.
your Atlas
I love
tree.
that. I love this.
Thirdly, we have created incredibly difficult and
The
rewarding
bosses.
Uber versions of 7 Pinnacle boss fights, which can
Let's
be
go.
accessed via 6 new Keystone passives.
Serious.
These fights are designed to
Let's
challenge
go.
the absolute best Path of Exile players.
Serious.
Suffice
We
to
are
say,
gonna-
They are brutally
Ooh.
difficult.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at some of the new Keystones and boss fights. The singular focus keystone makes it significantly more likely that your favored maps will drop. If a map drops that is not one of your favored maps, it will be
Nice.
converted into a random currency item. This
Amazing.
means that you'll exclusively see your favored maps, and outside of
Only
that, all
that.
currency. This is the realization
Love
of
that.
I only want to play one map dream that some players have.
Exactly.
It also helps players who are oversustaining
Cemetery
maps
map.
and would rather just get extra currency items.
Amazing.
The Stream of Consciousness keystone prevents you from modifying your maps with fragments or scarabs, but means that when extra content is being rolled for your maps, each of the base chances is 50% higher.
Amazing.
This is really useful for players who don't want to have to think about juicing their maps. And would
Exactly.
instead prefer to get a
Just
constant
going
moderate
on.
bonus instead.
Finally.
The following 2 keystones are for very advanced players who have completed their Atlas trees and want to get a very specific outcome with all of their skill points. The Wandering Path keystone increases the effect of small passives on your Atlas skill tree and disables all notable passives.
Wow, no.
The Grand Design keystone increases the monster pack size in each of your maps by an amount proportional to the number of notable passives you have allocated. However, the trade-off is that small passives have no effect.
Okay, I see. Okay. Get
These 2 keystones are very good for specializing into maximizing pack size
I
and
love that.
quantity at the expense of specific league content, which is great for general Magic Find builds or divination card farmers. The Twist of Fate keystone changes the behavior of corrupted rare maps in unpredictable ways. Upon entering a map, you may be sent to an alternative map of the same tier with randomized modifiers.
I don't
All
like.
of the master missions, scarabs, and Kyris crafts applied to the map will also be randomized.
Waff, no.
This process will not pick an outcome that was already on the map, so it always shifts it to a new property.
Yeah,
that you
it
didn't have
changes.
before.
Yeah, it can be good, but no, I don't like
This
that.
means that you can play all of the scarabs, master missions, and maps that you enjoy, and any leftover ones can be randomized to new outcomes, which are guaranteed to not be the ones you started with.
Yeah.
This may have some interesting economic consequences as well, with players feeding bad scarabs or maps into the Twist
To
of
get
Fate
better.
lottery.
Yeah.
The Wellspring of Creation and Dance of Destruction keystones change the ratios of monster life and damage in maps on the Atlas, so that they are more dangerous and less tanky, or vice versa.
Amazing. Love that.
These 2 keystones are designed to be remedial, allowing players with an abundance of offense or defense to normalize themselves so that they can handle the content better.
If you're a tankier,
If you find yourself in a
good.
situation where you're waiting for a weapon upgrade or can't fix your resistances, then you could allocate one of these keystones to temporarily make things easier, before unallocating it later when your build is complete. 6 new keystones create uber versions of Path of Exile's Pinnacle boss fights. Venarius, Cyrus, the Maven, the Searing
Cyrus,
Exarch,
let's
the
go.
Eater of Worlds, and the Shaper and Uber Elder, who I guess is now called the Uber Elder?
Double lava.
Allocating one of these keystones on your Atlas passive tree ramps up the corresponding boss fights so that it is extremely difficult.
20% chance
really
to drop.
hard. Harder than
Let's
saying
go.
goodbye to Zana hard.
Yeah, Zana.
Only allocate
She's not
these
coming
keystones
back.
if your character is extremely powerful and you know you can handle the challenge.
No
In
problem.
general, the encounter's rules are modified to be far more punitive and difficult. In return, though, you can earn some very enticing rewards. Each of the Uber fights has an additional high chance reward and a chance of getting a very, very rare chase reward.
That's good.
For example, the
OC
Uber
everybody
Maiden
can play.
guarantees an elevated sextant if you're able to complete the encounter.
Really?
Very rarely, though, you may be able to earn an awakened exceptional support gem as well, such as Empower, Enlighten, or Enhance. These keystones unlock crazy battles that will challenge our most aspiring players who are deep in Path of Exile's endgame.
Yeah, but I like that.
Difficulty for those who want to push their builds even farther than they ever have before.
It's good.
The keystones we have shown you so far are
Yeah, I
designed
saw.
for many different types of endgame players. Some glass cannon players struggle with defenses but have no problem with offense. Some players want to just play one map. Some players want the difficulty to be ramped up and to receive rewards commensurate
Easily
with this added challenge.
50x.
The keystones also let you identify a specific reward, type of content, or playstyle and know exactly how you can get the most out of it. There are a number of other new keystones that we'll reveal before release. Like the ones we have shown you today, these keystones require you to consider your endgame plan in an entirely new light. We're very interested to see what strategies you will use to try to conquer the new Uber Pinnacle bosses. Before we get into the new unique items, there are a few other endgame Atlas changes that we should cover. We are removing Vinctar's Square and Doyani's Machinarium from the Atlas of Worlds because they are not natural map drops. You can still get and play these maps, of course, but they aren't counted for your overall Atlas completion anymore.
I'm okay with that.
Their Atlas passive points have been moved to rewards for defeating the Infinite Hunger and the Black Star. We have rebalanced influence altars and maps. They now feel a lot different than they did in the form they were introduced in Siege of the Atlas. Their downsides now feel more impactful and they have more diversity of rewards, including new rewards. The intention is to fulfill the original design goal of having an ultimatum-like choice about whether you want to accept additional challenge for additional reward. We've added better Atlas tree support for them, including 2 keystones that can affect them. We've also rebalanced the drop weightings of the new Pinnacle Atlas bosses, changing the relative drop weightings of their unique rewards and making them more likely to drop Eldritch currency. Currently, in Siege of the Atlas, Elder and Shaper Scarabs are basically worthless because their influence is worse than the free influence you can get from the Eater of Worlds and the Searing Exarch. In Sentinel, you can now apply multiple types of influence to one map, so you could have Eater of Worlds influence alongside a Shaper or Elder Scarab on a Conqueror map. Together, these 3 influences combined have a very large effect on that map, and this will make Elder and Shaper Scarab significantly more desirable.
That's really good. Let's go.
Shaper, Elder, or Conqueror influence and influence items has been raised to level 81 areas. We've also fixed an issue that was causing some players to skip playing most of the contents of maps. On the lower half of the Atlas passive tree, there were a lot of small skills that granted a 2% chance for the map boss to drop an additional map. This meant that it was possible to sustain maps by rushing to those bosses and ignoring every other monster in the map. We've retained the overall bonus, but have changed it so the map drops from a random monster within the map rather than the boss.
Ah, nice. That's good. Give power to the monsters.
We're also addressing an issue with the way that you acquire Maven boss fight invitations. Currently, it's possible that you get hit with a bad streak of RNG and haven't found an invitation by the time you have enough bosses witnessed. You can now purchase these invitations from Kirak for a moderate price if you need to. At the launch of the Siege of the Atlas expansion, we hosted a competition that saw players racing to be the first to kill Path of Exile's Pinnacle bosses in hardcore solo self-found mode. The main prize for doing so was the ability to collaborate with us on the design of a unique item that would drop from a boss in Path of Exile's endgame. 5 of these uniques have been designed so far and will be featured in this expansion. The 6th one will be released once the winner has time to design it, very likely in 3.19. Call of the Void is a new cold-themed ring that was designed by Lighty and will drop from the Uber Elder. It causes all damage to chill and causes chilled enemies to shatter on death, as though they were frozen. On top of this, chilled enemies deal less damage back to you based on the magnitude of the chill affecting them. The only drawback is that all incoming damage also chills you, but there are many ways to mitigate this, and in some cases it's beneficial to builds that utilize self-chill as part of some crazy combo. This ring is useful for a wide variety of different endgame builds.
Oh, fuck.
Echoes of Creation is a new unique helmet also designed by Lighty, which will drop from the Shaper. It's designed for builds that use Warcries and grants an extra use before cooldown to Warcry skills that are socketed in the helmet. It also grants more damage to exerted attacks based on the number of Warcries affecting them, but causes you to take damage when you use these attacks.
That
The
looks
self-damage number looks really scary.
Oh,
but
this
it's can be
character looks
mitigated
pog.
by various mechanics such as armor, endurance charges, and life recovery. This powerful niche helmet is ideal for characters that try to use as many Warcries as they can. The third Lighty unique being introduced is the Burden of Truth, a unique belt which will drop from Kyris. Broadly speaking, this belt encourages you to have healthy energy shield and life pools and helps you to achieve this by granting you additional energy shield based on a percentage of your maximum life value. The belt
is
both
Supreme
lets some portion of
Decadence.
chaos damage hit your energy shield, but also causes some non-chaos damage to bypass your energy shield like it was chaos damage. This is often an upside because splitting damage over both life and energy shield lets you recover both
I have to
simultaneously.
focus on one.
The Supreme Decadence keystone that this belt grants, which is previously restricted to timeless jewels, causes your life flasks to apply to both your life and energy shield at a reduced rate. Overall, this belt is extremely powerful for characters who can build to have a decent energy shield pool while also using life flasks appropriately. The fourth new item that we're featuring today was created by Waggle. It's an amulet called the Eternal Struggle, which will drop from either the Infinite Hunger or the Black Star. The amulet has a pair of Eldritch mods, and the one that is dominant will be based on which of the bosses dropped it. The dominant mod also controls whether the amulet gives a Malignant Madness or Culling Strike bonus. You'll need to work out which of the two bosses to farm based on which half of the amulet you want to
15% or
activate.
lower life on hit.
The final unique we're showcasing today was designed by Steel Mage. It's a unique jewel that drops from the Maven. The jewel refers to a random keystone on your passive skill tree and enables you to be able to allocate passives within a radius around that keystone without them being connected to the rest of the tree. While the keystone itself cannot be allocated, this jewel allows you to jump across great distances on the passive tree in a very skill point efficient way.
What?
In
Alright.
addition to these uniques that have come from the boss kill competition, we have added new unique items to the Uber Pinnacle boss fights that can be accessed through some of the new keystone passives. These include a different variation of Thread of Hope that can drop from Uber Cyrus.
Look at this
a new
simple
unique
vision.
jewel which can drop from the Uber
Arrows
Shaper,
from your skills
and
have
special
20%,
Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh
23%
jewels, which can
increased
roll
effect on you.
exclusive ascendancy notable passives that are not available anywhere else in the game. You'll notice that our last endgame expansion was just 3 months ago, and we're already extending the endgame even further.
Yeah, I saw
This
his
is our
D now.
plan for every expansion
That's
leading
good.
up to the release of Path of Exile 2. Rather than having a much bigger annual expansion, we plan to add as many endgame improvements into each quarterly expansion as we can, alongside its new challenge league, so that there are new challenges to overcome every time you come back to Path of Exile. One of the subtle but important aspects of our plan is to keep adding powerful new chase rewards to Path of Exile's endgame, so that there are always new reasons to complete aspirational content. The boss kill competitions are great because they not only create these rewards, but also immortalize the achievements of some of Path of Exile's best
Good that,
players.
bro.
We're going to run another boss kill competition at the launch of Sentinel. This time, players will have to defeat the Uber versions of boss fights that are unlocked by the special Keystone passives. We'll post full information in the lead up to release. We're
Okay,
gonna try something
let's see
new with
this.
character balance in this expansion. We're intentionally making no changes to character power. That means no nerfs, no buffs, nothing. Every single build and build guide made for
No
Seeds
way.
of the Atlas will work exactly the same in Sentinel.
No
You
way!
can start planning your league starter right now, with full confidence about exactly how it's going to play.
No way!
However, build exploration is still required in 3.18. Sentinel introduces many difficult challenges, both in
We
the
did-
challenge league itself and in the endgame content.
Amazing!
You're gonna have to work with
Finally!
time to create characters that are able to handle this content. But at this release, you can hit the ground running, knowing with confidence which builds are a good starting point for you.
Oh man.
We don't intend to do this character balance freeze every release. For example, 3.19 definitely contains planned changes.
Yeah,
to
we don't
character
care. Now we are
Even
about
though there are no
318.
character balance
I don't
changes
know
in
if I
3.18,
live there.
We have still made some changes to actual game content. For example, let's talk about the changes to monster modifiers. Magic and rare monsters in Path of Exile get a lot of their power from their modifiers.
That's amazing.
We came up with the majority of the monster mods over a decade ago, and only substantially added to them with the introduction of the Nemesis and Bloodlines leagues in 2013 and 2014. These mods are unfortunately showing their age. Many of them are unimpactful, and it's quite hard to quickly read their descriptions in the heat of combat. What we need is a new set of mods that are highly impactful in combat,
Pasted,
keyworded,
gargantuan.
colored words that are easy to read at a glance, and capable of producing dangerous combinations. This is exactly what we designed the Arch Nemesis mods to be, a replacement for the core monster mod pool. From 3.18 onwards, all previous monster mods have been replaced by Arch Nemesis mods. No other part of the Arch Nemesis League has been retained, so there's no more inventory or recipe management.
It's okay
Magic
for me.
monsters have one Arch Nemesis mod shared across their pack, and rare monsters typically have 2 mods. However, it's possible to encounter rare monsters with 3 or even 4 Arch Nemesis mods on them.
Fucking hell.
Combinations of multiple synergistic mods can create quite interesting situations in combat. For example, if you encounter a monster with both Storm Strider and Ice Prison, the Ice Prison may block you off so that you are more likely to run into the lightning mirages from the Storm Strider mod. We've done a balanced
Exactly.
of Nemesis mods before making them core.
Headhunter, it's gonna be crazy. Imagine.
Particularly when applied to magic monsters.
I was thinking
We've
about
also
that.
changed how monster experience and drops are calculated, so it's now far more about the difficulty of the mods than about the proportional size of the monster. Various Nemesis and Bloodlines modifiers that were not represented in the Arch Nemesis mod pool have been added in different ways.
Okay.
Path of Exile's challenge system has remained the same for the last 21 leagues. For Sentinel, we had a look at whether there were any easy ways we could update it based on what we have learned over the last 6 years.
Okay.
Our plan is to retain the model of 40 challenges with rewards that unlock as you progress through them, but with a goal of providing substantially more challenge to endgame players and substantially more rewards to go with it, of course. In
Amazing.
order to achieve this, we've crunched down the easier challenges so that the first reward unlocks after only 6 and the second at 12. These are equivalent in difficulty to 12 and 24 challenges from the old system, respectively. This change gives us a lot more space to ramp up to some incredibly difficult challenges towards the end, which will take a lot of time and skill to complete. There are now 10 different rewards you can unlock, which comprise 2 complete armor sets, each with a pair of wings. But be warned, the challenges you must complete are much, much harder than any that we have ever set you before. We've been experimenting with
We don't
support for
care.
game
Did you see
controllers
how
for the 40
how
version of
nice
Path
it
of
looked?
Exile. During the Arch Nemesis League, we began a beta for controller support and have been making improvements based on your suggestions and feedback. We're pleased to announce
It's
that
amazing.
controller support on PC will officially launch alongside the Sentinel expansion. This also means that Path of Exile is now fully playable on the Steam Deck for those of you who are lucky enough to have one so far. Alongside finishing controller support for PC, we've also done a push on various small quality of life features in this expansion.
Let's see this.
Which will
I
reveal
like
in
this.
the coming days. An example is that you can now choose whether your hideout portals can be accessed by one of 4 options: everyone, your friends, your guild members, or no one. We have also improved how favored maps are selected on the Atlas. Rather than having to click on the map on the Atlas for every slot, you can instead click on one of your existing favored maps to quickly copy it to the new
Yeah, it's
slot.
okay.
This
It's
makes it
better.
a lot
Yeah.
faster to favor many instances of the same
Yeah.
map at once.
The distance for the
There are
mouse.
plenty more small QOL features crammed
Yeah,
into
it's
Sentinel,
okay.
and we'll cover these over the week leading up to release. Early in the Arch Nemesis League, we debuted Kyrix Vault Pass. Purchasing this pass grants you access to Kyrix Vault, where you can claim exclusive unique item skins as you complete map bonus objectives in the Atlas endgame. The Vault Pass for the Arch Nemesis League is only available for a few more days and will leave the store forever when this league ends. There's no penalty for purchasing the pass late in the league after you've wrapped up your map completion. So if you are pleased with where you got to in Arch Nemesis and want to lock in your unique skins, it's not too late to buy your pass now.
No. Not
Thank
interested.
you to everyone who unlocked Kyrix Vault. We had a lot of fun putting it together and tried to think of fun ways that unique item skins can interact with gameplay in a visual way. The purchases directly fund development of both Path of Exile 1
Block
and
portals
2.
is very good.
A brand new Vault Pass will launch alongside the Sentinel League. Like the previous one, there are 8 exclusive unique item skins that can be unlocked as you complete map bonus objectives. We'll post full details on these new rewards closer to launch. To buy either the Arch Nemesis Pass now, before it leaves the store forever, or the Sentinel one when the expansion launches.
Look how they are
visit
trying to make some money
pathofexile.com/vault.
fast. Quickly.
Alongside today's livestream, we're launching 2 new series of supporter packs, the Arcanist and Reaper packs. Each tier contains the pack's full face value in
Reaper
points,
is
plus
red,
several
I'm pretty sure.
exclusive microtransactions.
Oh no, black.
These
What am I
packs are
talking?
only available during the Sentinel League and will leave the store forever in 3 months. Every microtransaction you're about to see is entirely cosmetic and does not affect your character's progression or power. The Arcanist pack series contains 7 exclusive microtransactions. The Cloak of Elements indicates the power of your fire, cold, and lightning resistances on your back. When a resistance is capped, the effect is extra strong.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
While
Cosmetics.
wearing the Ring of the Black Star,
like
your
that.
level up effect looks like this.
Holy!
In the Timekeeper's hideout, you can use the chronosphere to change the time of day from dawn to noon to dusk to night.
What? That's nice. That was for leveling up. OST. That's nice. That's nice.
With Chevron's tome on your belt, identifying items will cause exploding books to appear nearby.
I like that. I like those
The Mage
cosmetics.
Blue map device blossoms with greater intensity as you open higher tier maps.
What? Oh, the cosmetics are amazing now. That they react
the
with your
Soul Stun and
progression.
weapon effect attached to your weapon, any attacks that stun will cause your enemies to have an out-of-body experience. Drinking from the searing Quicksilver flask causes an explosion and sets your character on fire. The
Yeah,
Reaper Pack
OST.
series also has 7 exclusive cosmetic microtransactions. The Soul Harvester's Cloak's power is based on the number of enemies your character has killed.
And the max
With
is
the
that.
belt of the Hive Queen equipped, flasks you use will cause blood-sucking insects to appear all over your character.
Nice.
The
With
Ghostlight
Hat
Graveyard is a hideout where you can control the color of its torches.
Mage Blood, you have them
It
all.
also comes with
Nice.
6 exclusive hideout decorations. Medidrone will follow you around and use a healing beam on you whenever you're gaining life. Thanks, Medidrone.
Nice.
The Underworld portal opens a gateway to Hell. Its effect upgrades in Part 2 and again in maps, where it indicates what tier of map you're playing. While wearing the Ring of the Exorcist, any spells you cast will exorcise the ghosts of your enemies if you crit. While using the Grim Reaper apparition, the
Hey,
Reaper
Sarah,
will
how's it
appear
going?
and cull any unique or rare enemies you slay. As I mentioned before, these packs are exclusive to the Sentinel League and will leave the store in 3 months. They're available right now at pathofexile.com/purchase, and they directly fund the ongoing development of Path of
Level
Exile
up.
2 and Path of Exile 1 expansions like Sentinel. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks for joining
Amazing.
us and checking out today's reveals. We can't wait to see you in Raycast on May 13th. We'll begin the Q&A in a few moments, so please get your questions ready in chat.
Bros, I'm very happy because I love something is that they are giving us the power to decide what we want to farm. You know, that we have this liberty, you know, that we can say, okay, I want to farm more delirium, or I want to farm more like some expedition or so on, and I want to ignore legion, I want to ignore this and that. I love that. I love that. You know, what I really like is what they are doing, the changes they are making to the game itself. But I think this league mechanic, I don't know. I think I will not like it that much. I will still play it, but I don't think it's gonna poggy one. Yeah, the film. I mean, yeah. I think the changes that they are making to the core game, you know, giving more those Atlas passive skills, they have added the 20 ones of them. This is amazing. Secondly, that you can now encounter other bosses, even stronger ones, for more rewards. You know, if you have a big or a very good build, why not? You know, so that you reward people going really deep into the game, you know, and getting stronger. I like that, you know. The changes are amazing like this. The quality of life changes they have made, that you can, because until now you could only like lock your hideout so that scammers don't come over. Now you can lock your portals. Much better for me, you know, so that people not coming, you know, and then they just waste your portals or so, like, or like this, you know. I like that, you know. But the league mechanic, guys, I don't know. What do you think? I think the league mechanic is gonna be meh. I don't like with those 3 orbs there. I don't know. I will play it for sure, but yeah, the clicking. That's the thing, you know. Then when do you decide to click on which orb? You know, I like to go on. And but I like those league mechanics that you don't have to stop. You can't just go on, go on, go on.
Exiles, and welcome back. It is Ziggy D here with none other than Chris Wilson. How you going this morning, Chris?
Hey, good, thanks. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for hosting another Q&A and having me on to ask you some questions. Always a pleasure. I think we have to straight away jump into the last part. This is completely different to my planned order of events here, but
what, the
does
microtransaction?
Actually heal you?
No
Everyone was
POE
like,
2?
Oh no, it's just an effect that shows when you're getting healed from flasks and stuff, which you can see in the UI already, but this is just a different way of seeing it visually, and that's a theme for a lot of the new microtransaction is trying a new visual twist on showing information that players already have access to.
Wow,
yeah, you guys are
the
kind of
quality of the microphone, bro.
Although
of Chris
I
Wilson.
wasn't really a fan of the blood sucking.
Come on, you have no money?
Why would I pay money for that? That's horrible.
I reckon it's going to be low-key quite popular, because what's going to happen is the packs will eventually go off sale, people will have it, and they'll forget about it, and then you'll see someone covered in insects and think, what is happening?
No, that's my least favorite thing. Thank you. Okay. So I thought we'd kick things off actually with Sentinel first, and I wanted to ask what inspirations led to us having a cute little drone league this time around.
Well, we tried not to make them too cute. So our motivation here was that we wanted to have a combat mechanic that was kind of like a build your own breach kind of thing, something where you can take combat with you and it doesn't interrupt the flow of gameplay. You know, normally when you're playing like Breach or Delirium, there's a point in the map where we say now it's time for there to be some dynamic combat stuff.
Exactly.
And so here we thought, what if we make a mechanic where several different times during a map the player can choose the right time that they get to deploy the Sentinel and have juiced up combat.
It's nice. You can choose more liberty.
Idea first, and then the mechanics of it follow on, or do you have we want to do this mechanically, try and come up with a theme for this?
We came up with mechanics first. In this case, the goal was to have something which attacks monsters around you, making them a lot harder and more rewarding. And then from there, we realized we can have complicated mods on this. And it actually started off with a bit of an organic theme. Like our initial random idea, thrown together on a Saturday, was that this was some kind of growth on the character that projects something at the monsters. And that's actually why. So computer scientists in the crowd will notice that the method we use for combining Sentinels is very similar to genetic programming, the concept of taking some properties from one, properties from the other, and having a chance of mutation. And that analogy worked well with the organic side, because you're kind of breeding these growths or whatever, but it ended up working a lot better, in terms of understandability, to have Sentinels that follow you around. And the analogy for creating new ones there is that because the power is depleted, you need to create a new one around a power core, and you don't really know how the Sentinels work. Because they're ancient technology, so you're kind of putting it together the best you can, and that's why you get a combination of properties and also some random quirky mutations occasionally.
Sorry.
Nice. I prefer this approach, I think, for a few reasons, but I'm interested in this idea of fantasy technology, ancient lost technologies that are more advanced. That's a theme I love, and it's something that Path of Exile's been doing more and more over time. This sort of ancient, otherworldly, or esoteric technology. Has this always been a plan for PoE's world building, or is it something that's evolved over time?
Well, there was a bit of it there from the beginning with the Val, right? They're a civilization that clearly has a lot of interesting stuff going on that predates what the player is currently doing by thousands of years. And so we established the fact that they have stuff like floating machines already. Now, of course, the Sentinels are not Val technology.
Who gives a fuck about that?
Players might be able to
talk about the game.
But yeah, we feel it's established that there is ancient technology that's honestly a lot more powerful than what's going on in Rayclast currently.
It's sad when ancient technologies like automatic doors are lost.
Is this history class or what? We want to talk about the game. Talk about the game, bro. One day. Who gives a fuck about that?
About the weight of the door.
Oh, no. Quote. Perfect. So how much harder do the Sentinels make enemies, and in what ways do they make them harder? I wasn't really clear on that watching it.
So they make combat harder in several ways. From your point of view, the monsters...
back at the game.
When they attack you, they're doing damage and more stuff, and when you attack them, they're harder to kill. And this honestly varies a lot depending on the rarity of the monster. With a normal monster, which obviously has very low life and damage to start with, they're buffed a lot more percentage-wise than a rare or unique monster. So if we're applying, like, I don't know, this is me picking a number out of the air, like a 400% buff to a normal monster, we're certainly not applying a 400% buff to Katava. And it's in a way similar to Delirium. It did similar types of scaling. Now, this also depends on the type of Sentinel. For example, the one that empowers the entire screen, the Pandemonium Sentinel, it has a bit less of a buff than the one which is specifically there to target specific monsters.
That's
or the one
normal.
which is a little bit slower at targeting ones, the Stalker Sentinel. And all of this is captured in that empowerment arbitrary number that's scored on the Sentinel. And this is just a number. It doesn't directly correlate to a percentage the player can understand, but it is used internally at different, different scaling amounts depending on what type of monster it is. Generally, more empowerment equals more damage reduction, and of course, better rewards. Now, the key thing about this is that we've tried very hard to make sure that empowerment is given to you proportional to any, extra bonuses and stuff you're getting. So it's like with maps where you get pack size and quantity and that kind of thing as you put harder and harder mods on the maps. The same thing is true for your Sentinels, that as you make better and better ones, they'll proportionally get better empowerment to go with it.
Okay. Yeah. I like the idea that this is like ancient lost technology we don't understand, and also the mechanic is a little bit obscure as well. Was that kind of intentional?
We especially don't want people understanding how the combination process stuff works, but yeah, the general rule is Sentinels give you the opportunity to make combat a lot harder than normal, and in return you'll get rewarded. And there are some cases where the rewards double dip, which are quite interesting that I can talk about.
People sorting through like the game code to better understand mechanics like this has been a thing.
Like mechanics you can ignore,
but
or take with you.
How do you design something like that then that manages to keep some level of obscurity in a system like this?
Well, from a crafting point of view, the rules are all server-side, so we can come up with complicated random things on the server and hope people can't reverse engineer it. On the client, though, I believe there's nothing that they can reverse engineer that will relate to this damage stuff, so we pretty much get to make big spreadsheets on our end, implement
exactly film. That's it.
That model and try as much as possible.
I think
to make sure the players are rewarded for any additional difficulty they have. We don't want a situation where you get a bad Sentinel that's making combat harder and not giving you something for it. And so every bit of additional difficulty will give you additional item quantity, rarity, and experience, notwithstanding any of the other bonuses you get to item drops.
I find that like balancing point of like the obscurity versus players, like if something is learnable, then players feel like they maybe have to learn it as well, whereas the opposite is true as if it's unlearnable in an extent. But at the same time, you have to think about whether players can sort of still engage with the mechanic and feel like they're having some level of control over it. Do you think there's like a level of player control here?
Well, we want to make sure that people understand the core principles of it, even if the actual math behind the scenes is intentionally obfuscated. And the principle here basically is, it's like with other things that juice the combat difficulty, is juice it as much as you can, but not too much, otherwise you'll die. And so there's an extreme level of player control here for a few reasons. Firstly, you choose when to deploy a Sentinel in the map and which Sentinel to deploy. Secondly, you choose which Sentinel you're using.
Yeah, you choose everything.
Are you using unique? Are you using just a regular magic one? Regular
more freedom?
Have you managed to find a rare with good mods? You have your entire Sentinel controller to spec how you want. And if, for example, the Sentinel combat is too hard, there are ways in your controller to spec more in the direction of rewards and less in the direction of empowerment. And of course, respecking there is free, so it's relatively easy to dynamically adjust the difficulty, so it's never too hard for you, and you're just getting constant rewards from it.
Nice. How much is this affecting the reward then, since we're juicing up these monsters?
The empowerment that affects difficulty also proportionally affects item quantity, rarity, and experience. And you can also get these additional reward icons on monsters. You'll notice in the footage, when the Sentinels empower monsters, occasionally you see like a currency icon or something appear above them.
Reward types.
Now, it's worth noting, there's a base level of monsters giving out these reward icons, of Sentinels giving out these reward icons. So even if you have no mods on the Sentinel and no speccing into anything fancy, you'll occasionally get reward icons. But there are lots of mods that will give you additional reward icons a percentage of the time. Now, these mods are factored into the empowerment number, so it double dips where, because the mod is on the thing, the monster is slightly harder, which means that it stacks more rarity and quant as a side effect. And so you get kind of a double dipping effect there, where you get twice as many, effective rewards.
Double dipping. How often do Sentinels drop?
His love is a bit
weird.
You can
find Sentinels as you play through the game, and they also drop from Sentinel caches, which are scattered throughout the world. They're pretty often. The intention is not that you run out of Sentinels, right? You'll always have Sentinels to use. The question is whether you have good ones or not. And you'll notice they're corrupted, so you can't just drop AUX on them. It is actually difficult to have a constant supply of good rare Sentinels, but you can put the work in, you can spec into this stuff, you can, do clever combining, and we expect that any good player in Path of Exile will generally have good Sentinels that they can use most of the time. And I understand the concerns that this feels like a bit of micromanagement, but it honestly plays pretty streamlined. Essentially, you can use Sentinels for a number of maps, and there are lots available to drop more ones in as they're depleted. And if you'd like to Sentinel enough that you miss it when it's run out of power, then that's a really good candidate for combining, because if you combine two things together and you liked both of them, chances are you're getting something roughly similar out the other end. Occasionally you might get something worse, but sometimes you'll also get something better, and it could get a core mutation on it where you get some mod which you'd never considered. The stuff like duplicating
I'm feeling
tags,
people,
for example, or doing a lot of other cool stuff.
will not
we'll
like the league mechanic. The changes, yes, to the game, but
mentioned on Twitch, but they'll kind of
not
like
league
breeding a bloodline of good Sentinels, if you see what I mean.
I'm just
I've been
saying.
playing Crusader Kings recently. I know all about that.
Because
Okay.
the league mechanic is just adding more drops, and that's it. There's nothing. I don't know. Don't know how to tell you.
Is this like combining up of the Sentinels, and how do you like design a mechanic like this to avoid the like talisman like for the old players of PoE situations where these mechanics become really laborious because there's a lot of combining?
So you don't really combine up through the tiers. You find better tiers of Sentinels. So as you play through the game, you'll find better and better ones. You do combine if you want to have a chance at making Sentinels.
Exactly, I think also is the
like. So the theoretical best Sentinels can come from combining. So in terms of base types, the way it works is there's a progression from low level to high level, just like bows or wands or something like that. And we also have a few other base types that can only come through combining. But once you've got it from combining, you can then potentially persist that one by combining it with other ones and getting lucky. The purpose of combining is when you're finished with two Sentinels you found effective, you get a chance to get something that's moderately similar to what you put in. And that really helps with sustaining rare Sentinels, as well as occasionally getting good unique ones and so on. The talisman comparison is a good one, but we have learnt very much from the problems of that league. And the first problem we had with talisman was that the item you were making was competing with amulets, right? It was hard to get good rare talismans, and it was easy to get good rare amulets, so therefore talismans were worthless much of the time. Here, it is hard to get good rare Sentinels, but nothing else can go in that slot, and so it's a bit of a slower item progression than what people are used to. We've definitely designed the combining system to be more of a crafting system, rather than talisman, where you couldn't do stuff on demand. If you wanted to do combining, you had to go and find some stones, do a whole boss fight, etc. Here, you can make new Sentinels wherever you want to.
The item crafting system where you can combine armors in a similar fashion, how similar is that to the Sentinel crafting? Like, will combining a bunch of Sentinels kind of give you an idea of how that's going to then work on items?
Yes, it's quite similar. Basically, we were looking for something you can do to make new, really cool rares, and we realized that we have the system that was entirely designed around the genetic programming of assembling new Sentinels, and it would work really well for rare items. And so we basically tried it, and we came up with a bunch of interesting mods that can go on each of the slots, and I think we haven't previewed any particular ones yet, but the announcement page at pathofexile.com/sentinel has a bunch of mods that people can see in the relevant hovers there, and there's some pretty juiced stuff, so it should get people quite interested. But
more
the
mods for items or what?
This is not meant to be the way that people make the best item in the game, but it may make some of the best items in the game if you're lucky. And we've had conversations internally that involve questions like putting items that are mirror-worthy versus items that are strange on the other side, and interesting border cases that happen with the rules to try to make items that are mirror-worthy come out that, Anyway, interesting stuff going on with that. So we think that the Path of Excel players will really like trying to model how that works and to get the best value for their recombinators.
That's me every time I craft anything in PoE. This won't make the best item in the game, but
I told you, Osti.
It's
watching my stream.
Yeah, it's certainly a non-deterministic crafting thing, but it should be interesting. And I think especially if some of these recombinators make their way into standard, there could be some interesting things that happen after the league ends.
I think yes, explicitly.
Are there any hard rules with this recombinator thing? Like
the most expensive items are rares. The mirror tier items are rare.
I'll be more specific about roughly how this works, and this is probably the most
Hello,
information you're getting, right? So you put 2 items in, and it's going to pick one of the 2 base types. So for example, it'll pick the left or the right. Now with Sentinels, it has a chance to mutate the base type into a special one or to create a unique. We don't want the recombination process for your equipment to necessarily just randomly change the base type on you or to turn into a unique, because honestly, sometimes that's going to be worth less than the items you put in. So once it's picked a base type, for Sentinels, it uses that base type, and for your items, it retains all the properties of that core base type. For example, any enchants you've got on it, any corrupted status, implicits, all of that stuff, catalysts or whatever. This all gets dragged along with whichever base type was selected. Then for the explicit mod selection, it basically puts everything in a pool and selects some subset of it. So you get some mods from one of the items, some mods from the other. Sometimes you're unlucky and get way fewer mods than you started with. Sometimes you're lucky and get a whole bunch of good ones you liked. Then there's a chance for various things to occur, like it randomly tinkering with the tiers of the mods or rerolling values. And of course, it can add special mods, basically the mutation outcomes from a special pool. And that's where the really good Sentinel stuff is. You really want to get that available in the pool of stuff that you're combining, because then you get some really, really powerful Sentinels. Obviously, relatively optional, of course. The Sentinels work well without those mods, but they're a lot more powerful with them. And the same is true for regular rare items. If you are doing this basically recombination lottery, you get the ability to get, like, keystones on body armors and that kind of stuff, which could be pretty useful for some builds.
Fun. That does sound like a lot of fun. Back to gameplay on Sentinel for a little bit. What's to stop players from using a Sentinel on a boss like right before it dies to subvert the challenge?
Right, so basically when a monster is empowered, it is fully healed. And most of the time, Sentinels empower monsters before you get a chance to get to that monster, and so there's no problem whatsoever. If you were to, try to cheese a boss down to low life and then bring a Sentinel out, then yes, you do have to fight it again.
Because I was already thinking about that.
Internally, when people first see our promotional material before they've played the League, is they say, well, Path of Exile clear speed what it is, this is going to be so lame because the Sentinels are slow at tagging monsters and therefore I have to wait for them all the time. When they play the League, they realize it's very, very easy to spec into a Sentinels are very fast at tagging monsters and chain through monsters, and you get multiple beams, multiple chains, lots of tagging speed. And generally speaking, we've tested on very fast map characters, and if you spec correctly, there's no problem whatsoever with the Sentinels staying ahead of you. And of course, you have ones that hit a whole screen at once. The other thing to note is, and this is something that we didn't really emphasize there, is the Sentinels tag up to a specific number of monsters. So this means the one that tags a whole screen, you don't need to go and grab the entire map. Like, you don't have to have this lame playstyle where you pull the whole map to one place and then hit go to get everything tagged. It does have a limit. And this also means that as long as you're killing fast enough and the Sentinel's tagging stuff fast enough that you use its full limit, then it doesn't really matter if it misses hitting a couple of monsters due to you being so OP, because you'll still get full value out of that Sentinel.
All good, Kaiba.
Okay.
New reveal.
How does co-op work in Sentinel? I'm always interested.
Of the new league.
So basically with co-op, we've tried really hard to make sure that it doesn't penalize players. Both players can use their Sentinels in a map. A monster can only be tagged by only empowered by one Sentinel at once, but they can tag more monsters in an instance. When we're doing leagues, we try very hard to make sure nowadays that you're not in any way penalized for being in a party. So technically speaking, yes, playing in a party would let you tag an awful lot of monsters.
Yeah, that's I thought it would
so more group play, I see.
But I like that a lot more.
There's some good griefing opportunities where your guy you're playing with is waiting to tag the map boss with an Apex Sentinel, so you just hit your Pandemonium one faster than him and just tag the map boss with a really big one. This is immediately what comes to mind for me.
That's fine though, because like if you're playing in a party, you should be like trying to work together. And if you're not, well,
are you sure? My first experience with multiplayer Diablo 2 was we were killing Duriel in a public Battle.net game. This is back like 22 years ago, and I'm playing an Amazon. So Duriel dies, drops Worm Skull, grab it as fast as I can, and the Necro says, "Who got that?" And I say nothing. So that's the history behind multiplayer play for me.
Okay.
Talk about Diablo 2. Look at this guy.
That's why we have being able to kill each other at the bandits.
Honestly, yeah. It's nice for there to be some sharp edges occasionally.
Yeah. The bandit one's always like such an easy thing to forget as well.
Yeah. And chat's right. This is ninja looting, not scamming.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a deal. We didn't know. He wasn't helping me with Duriel.
It's nice that he's saying that it's okay to do that.
Okay. With league mechanics like this, when they're itemized in some way, it inevitably comes up. You have to make a decision about whether they're tradable or not. So what keeping things tradable is often much more in the spirit of Path of Exile, I find. We've sometimes seen this actually makes players less willing to use the mechanic themselves, like for Expedition, for example, where people were selling all of their currency instead of using it. What goes into the decision to make something like Sentinel tradable?
So in general, tradability is preferred, especially when there's other forms of progression. Like in Arch Nemesis, the mods that you had were your progression. And so if we made those tradable, then you could literally skip the league, find some exalts, trade them for the ability to do the hardest Arch Nemesis content. Here, because you have your Sentinel Controller, which powers up as you kill empowered enemies, you do actually have to engage with the league to progress with it, and therefore tradability is totally fine with the items in it. We also wanted to make sure with the combining system that players are able to trade for Sentinels that will combine well together, right? You know, there's one of those things where if you look at your pool of Sentinels and realize you don't have a good combine available, but you have a couple of Chaos Orbs spare, maybe you trade for something amazing and try to, you know, something that's been depleted and try to combine it with something that you liked. This also means that once you finish with a Sentinel, like let's say you don't like combining, you just want to play with your Sentinels, you can take the ones that were good and rather than combining them, you can trade them to other people to get some currency that you can use to buy potentially full Sentinels or actual items you want to play with or maps or whatever it is you're looking for.
I feel like we're creating cyberpunk scrap merchants now. That's fun. Great. Lots of people are asking about Headhunter with the Arch Nemesis mods.
Okay.
Now, how is Headhunter working now with this change?
Just the same as before, right?
It's gonna be crazy with Headhunter.
And then you're powerful, and then we cry.
Let's go. Headhunter even
also,
stronger now.
You mentioned it earlier. Everyone's asking about Ultimatum as well. I know that Bex answered this question recently, but for anyone who may have missed that, what's the news with Ultimatum?
We have a specific plan for Ultimatum, and we like this plan, and it's cool, and it's honestly cooler than the plan of let's just bring it back next league or something. And so we're going to do the cool plan, but that means you're not going to see Ultimatum for a little while.
Was never that strong than this league, I think.
Out. So yeah, no Ultimatum, but it's not just being ignored, right? And we have an awesome plan for it.
You're teasing the Ultimatum fans because you keep looking at mechanics and being like, it's just like Ultimatum.
The good news is the Alter stuff in its current form will feel a lot more like Ultimatum, right? So yeah,
that's what I mean. Yeah, that's good. On this topic, before we move on, we have apparently a lot of questions from chat. Okay. Well, HD, will there be any raw currency to refill the Sentinels? Just like if you have a good one, you just want to straight up recharge it.
We don't have any raw currency that does, but you will be going through quite a lot of Sentinels, and this is intentional. And to be completely honest, I'm going to explain this, right? So we know that it's controversial that these things run out of charge, right? We're not trying to just hurt the players. But in the version of this that we designed, where you use them forever, it was really boring. You get an okay Sentinel on day 2, and you just use it forever. And because of that, we had to make the good mods really rare, and you never see them.
Yeah.
And you'll never find a Headhunter Sentinel.
It's normal.
And it was terrible.
Otherwise, you are done with it.
Where they run out of charge, and you're constantly combining stuff together, and you see the full gamut of the league. You try new experiences, and you get to see a lot of the cool mods because we just ramped the spawn rate of everything. Like that Headhunter Sentinel, the Hollow-Eyed Skull, you're probably going to find one, right? Like it's consumable. It doesn't matter balance-wise if you have an insane time for a few maps, and this means that if you want to play with it every map, you just trade for one over and over. And so the model here with the recharging, honestly, is so much more fun than the one where you just get a perfect Sentinel or something good enough a few days in and never touch the league again.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. After 2 days, you get your Sentinel, you're good with it, and you play only that.
Okay. Carrybag asks, how do you get filaments for the passive tree thing?
It's just clicking on the sections, basically. There are these grooves, you click on it, a filament appears, you click on it, it goes away. It's literally a planning tool, right? There's no item, there's no specking, there's no points. Basically, you have an amount of power that will flow through the filaments wherever you've marked you want the power to go. And so basically, you could Google and find the best filament guide and spec it in on the first day and leave it and never open the panel again for the entire league, and it will magically fill with power as you level up your Sentinel Controller. Or you can go in there and tinker with it. And we're far more worried, because a lot of people, when looking at the reaction, were saying this is complicated and involves micromanagement. But I expect, honestly, they'll just spec something that looks good, later change it once or twice, and be done with it for the most part. Unless you're a player who really, really cares about micromanaging stuff, in which case, have a great time. To the point where we have insane rules to do with snapshotting to stop people, like, auto hotkeying something where it changes to one Sentinel spec, they release that Sentinel, then they change it to a different, like... The abuse case makes this a living nightmare to implement, but we think we've got something that's not going to get in the way of players actually playing it.
I didn't even think about that.
Well, I'm glad we thought of it before the players did, because
yeah. That's
Oh,
good.
yeah.
They're giving us infinite filaments. I'm so excited.
Yeah, that's good.
So good.
It's good. It's okay. I can change as you wish.
A name that is way too long, Namvan, asks, can you use unique sentinels to make other sentinels?
Yes. Yes.
they're not currently used in combining, but that doesn't mean we wouldn't randomly turn that on without telling people, if you see what I mean. But go experiment with stuff. This is the fun part of the league. We've got it in testing. It's going to be on alpha probably today for people who have alpha access. Do not email me for alpha access. You will not. Anyway, sorry. Just saving my inbox. We've got it going on alpha. We're going to get feedback, and this is the week where we get to make extra.
They could
things
give
for
me
fun,
alpha,
We get to
no?
look at it and go, maybe we should allow combining uniques or something like that, and come up with some extra stuff. So yeah, we'll come up with some cool ideas there.
I love the idea of combining uniques. That's super fun.
I'm gonna tell you if something is
With
also
these
bad.
recombinations,
Not like ZGD that is saying that
is there
everything
any way
is
to
great.
connect influences on items?
I don't know.
Combine two different influence items together. Can they do the same thing as an awaken orb and smush them together?
They
I'm
should.
going to do the dev check on that one.
It should
but
be
yeah,
Asmongold
explaining
there.
exactly
You
how
would
it
see
works,
what
so
he would tell
let's do
him.
with influences.
Well, the short answer is
Okay,
no.
he's
The long
he's
answer
happy with everything.
picks the non-influence base type. Then it won't be able to select influence.
Yeah, email him.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So when it's
so-
selecting base types, it picks one or the
But
other.
Chris
And if it
Wilson
picks
needs
one
somebody
that
to
is
tell
influ-
him.
is not
The first thing
influenced,
I
it
would
cannot
tell
select
him,
mods from the other
look
one
at your
that,
microphone, bro.
Have that influence or have influence, because then they couldn't copy across. So the influences have to.
It's
match
live.
whoever
It's live,
copied the mod.
Sasaki.
And there's still so much crazy abuse that players will work out with this kind of stuff. Like, we're coming up with crazy cases here where we have to put contrived stuff in to stop players making insane items that shouldn't exist. And even then, there's going to be a lot of rares that really have impossible mods on them that we are tolerating, and that's only the stuff we can think about. So, yeah.
So we can get mods
Um,
from this mechanic that are
That
not
answers the following question.
elsewhere you
In that
couldn't
case, we
get.
can move on to the next section. Let's talk a little bit about the endgame atlas, in particular the passive tree side of things, which was a huge introduction last league and been expanded upon with Keystones this time around. So we're being given a lot more control over our endgame experience now. Both these days in general, and also specifically now. Like Keystones, for example, allowing us to only drop our favorite maps.
Amazing.
And nodes that disable unwanted league mechanics and such.
Exactly.
This and the new passive tree overall feels like a big shift.
The one with the fragments
compared
is the
to
best.
PoE of yesteryear. What's led to the dramatic change for PoE's endgame and like player agency levels?
So, a lot of the
You're
time
welcome, my
when we
friend.
change our mind about something or do an experiment is because Path of Exile 2 is in the future. And we want to make sure Path of Exile 2 is the best game for the players possible. And that means, generally speaking, if we've tried something and there's a possibility we want to do it differently in PoE 2, we will try the other thing. And so with Siege of the Atlas, we said, have a ton of control over all this stuff. And players loved it, and it went really well.
Yeah,
So-
I like it too.
We're giving a bunch more control here. See how that goes. We have a lot of stuff lined up for the endgame updates between now and PoE 2, and we'll get a bunch of information, and then, reserve the right to change things massively when PoE 2 comes out, potentially.
It's a nice like safety net for you guys, I guess, because with a PoE 2, you can suddenly make big sweeping changes that otherwise people might be a little bit more resistant to. So I guess that kind of-
We have a schedule for like, I know exactly how many leagues there are between now and PoE 2, and we're putting the bullet points in of what we're going to do in these, and that's really helpful. Like, it gives us an actual runway of knowing this is how many times we have to experiment. Like, I have hard mode penciled in for one of these releases, and we know exactly ideally how that element's going to finish up and how much time it's going to give us between the release of hard mode and the release of PoE 2 for us to take feedback into account and see if there's any tweaks we'd make to the itemization based on data from that.
Come on.
How many leagues are until
Let's
PoE,
go.
Sorry, did you say?
It's a number. It's a countable whole number.
And I guess the follow-up question for a later question I was going to ask anyway. How many leagues until hard mode?
Probably 2, but we can talk about that when you ask the question.
2.
All right.
He said 2 leagues
I'm sure that's in my list somewhere.
until PoE 2.
Back to the Atlas, though, since that's what we're talking about at the moment. How successful overall do you feel that the new Atlas passive tree has been, and by what metrics do you tend to measure success of something like this when you implement it?
So we
For
didn't
hard
really
mode.
use metrics.
Yeah,
We
but
kind of knew
what
it's
is hard
awesome because
mode?
we play the game ourselves and we know it kind of feels right to us. So when we did it, we thought this is cool, and that's kind of good enough. And sure, if players absolutely hated it, we would have had a second thought about that. But we didn't look at metrics. I mean, here's an interesting thing, right? If you said to me, what was player retention like last league, I would have said absolutely amazing. Best ever. People played more and all this amazing stuff. But if you look at the numbers, they quit in droves when Lost Ark came out because you can't miss the release of that game, right? And then Elden Ring came out. Like, there was no way that people were going to get the full in-game experience. But yet, I still feel that endgame had the best retention because the players who happened to not be interested in the other two games played so much more than usual.
Yeah,
so to some extent, because a lot of our community went to play those really good other RPGs, we're expecting this is the actual release of the end game for them. Like, there are so many people who, and we're ignoring the fact that Diablo Immortal comes out in a few weeks, by the way, guys. That's not a game. We're going to play Path of Exile. But because people are sticking around for the whole league this time, they're actually
He's
going to
talking
have a full
already
league
2
with
times
new
about
systems
Diablo.
for the first time.
Bro,
That's,
you don't do that, bro.
Like an interesting.
You don't talk
counterpoint, I
about
guess, like looking at metrics.
Nah, about
there's
others,
always,
bro.
Like other things that are going on.
You don't do
Because
that.
I think a lot of people feel the same way that like this last league.
We
is,
don't need
in some
that. We are
ways, the
POE
best Path of
players.
Exile has been, especially for me, like endgame, especially like best endgame I've played in POE.
Yeah.
And yet. Other
Best.
games came out. Man, I'm sorry.
No, I completely understand. And that was unlucky for us. It would have been great if Siege did, have an uninterrupted 3 months, but life happens, and that involves other games. And
I think
with this release as well, it also gives people, because of the static balance thing where there's a balance freeze, it gives people the ability to just pre-plan what build they're going to play and just know there's all this cool in-game stuff they can do and have a chance to actually, like, when our internal staff members worked out due to lack of balance things, the balance is probably going to be the same. I started to see people, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the end of the league, start testing characters that are already public characters. Nothing's changed, of course, because they want to be ready for league launch day. And that gives all of the players the ability to do the same thing, where they can pick a build, try it out, work out their plan, and know with confidence there's no surprise nerfs in there. And this went to the point where there are bug fixes, where I've had very long repeated conversation with people say to me, it's not a nerf, it's a bug fix, Chris, and we haven't put it in because technically it does affect how a build performs. And so we've left bugs in the damn game for this league. They're going to be fixed in 3.19, but you get to use those bugs again if you want to, if that's the build.
Okay, I find that really funny. Oh no, okay. No,
what was funny about that?
Like, we're getting sidetracked a lot today. It's great.
I'm just asking.
Oh yeah. So the passive tree, the Atlas passive tree thing. That thing's awesome. I love that. How do you guys feel about where like the concept of tree lock-in is at? That is like the ease and cost of respeccing the Atlas tree.
We're pretty happy with it. There's the vendor trade that caps the price from things getting too expensive, and we're not seeing players constantly respeccing the tree too often. To some extent, we want it to be expensive to respec, but it's turned out to be in a pretty good place. So we do want to avoid strategies where you respec between encounters and so on. But technically, if you have the wealth, you can do that kind of strategy.
Yeah, it's not that expensive.
Yeah, it's kind of in line with.
It's like 1 chaos each or 2.
The only kind
max.
of like friction point that I've thought of there is the idea of like different characters having the same shared passive tree. I love that it's shared progression, but rather if you've got like a bossing character and a mapping character, it's awkward that you can't have like separate trees for them. Is that something you guys have talked about at all?
There's some discussion about this. Like, we do acknowledge that that's certainly a thing, but we don't have any firm plans for it. There's various repercussions, both from a implementation point of view and in terms of, like, obviously it lets you then have multiple Atlas specs that you can easily switch between for the cost of just hitting maps with a new character, which may be enough of a cost, but we don't have any firm plans, but it's certainly something that's being discussed.
Okay. Do you guys have like allocation, like heat maps for the Atlas passive tree? I think are maybe releasing something like that for the regular passive tree at some point. Is that something you look at all?
We can generate the data. We generally don't generate the data. Like, there was an internal joke that we generate stats for news posts, and then we get a chance to see what people are doing. We honestly balance based on actually how things feel a lot of the time, because it's just so easy to look at the stats and completely misinterpret how something, completely misinterpret the stats by accident. There are people who write in by looking at POE.ninja and say, because of this percentage, you need to do blah. And when we look at our data just to double check it, it's entirely different because of some, bad statistics used, or that's only high-level characters or whatever. Like, here's an example, right? We were talking about Detonate Dead as a league starter, and I mentioned in conversation it's going to be pretty popular for reasons. And someone goes and looks up Detonate Dead on POE.ninja and sees that at the top of the ladder it's not really that popular compared to other builds. Well, obviously, as a league starter, it's not something that people are sitting at level 100 with. And so it's super easy if someone just goes and gets data to actually cause damage. Like, you have to think quite a lot more than that. So we try not to pre-generate data to look at and find problems with. And while it's cool to have heat maps, and I'm sure to make a good image, we haven't bothered. And I mean, we haven't made a concerted effort to buff or nerf specifically mechanics on the Atlas tree. We just fixed a few specific things like certain influence types being too strong. But generally speaking, this isn't path of nerfs for the Atlas tree either. Maybe for the older stuff, but you know, that's pretty obvious there.
It sounded like you might have touched on my question there, my follow-up question, which is about the balance between Exarch and Eater of Worlds influence. In particular, it seemed like you know, one was significantly better than the other.
Yeah, the patch notes are coming out just after this chat, so people will be able to see what we've changed. And our goal was to make Exarch as valuable as Eater, so hopefully we've managed to achieve that.
That's good.
Cool, great.
That's good.
So answer some of my following questions. We're getting Keystones, and you mentioned ambitious plans to keep expanding the endgame until POE 2. Does this mean that we will see Atlas Masteries and Cluster Jewels for the Atlas tree and so on?
We have not actually had an internal discussion that's brought up masteries and cluster jewels and stuff, aside from when, you showed me a draft of some of these questions and I asked the team what their thoughts were. That was the first time we actually discussed the concept of masteries and cluster jewels for the Atlas. So the intention is that we come up with things that make sense for it being an Atlas, which could be masteries and cluster jewels. Maybe those are great tools, right? But we'd have to actually work it out based on what the Atlas needs at the time.
I can see masteries. The Cluster Jewels one was like, I kind of added it as a joke. I'm like, oh, that's ridiculous. But then again, I don't know. I feel like it could happen one day, so we'll see. More seriously, though, in what ways are you folks looking to expand PoE's already like massive endgame over this like period between now and PoE 2?
So you're probably going to see more player agency and more rewards for engaging with difficult content.
That's
kind
good.
Of this thing where
I like
Path
that.
of Exile player will get to the end game. And then they'll be like, I guess I'm done now. I've done my stuff, got my character finished. And the more stuff we can make it really clear of, actually, if you do this thing, you could get this reward. Like the challenges, for example, or these Uber Pinnacle fights. The more stuff we can dangle in front of you, the more time you will play. And maybe the more time you play, the more stuff you buy. And so this is like a business plan of give people more game. And that means more player agency, more rewards, more content. We have a plan for actual in-game content we're going to roll out. And you'll see it in coming expansions. Like our goal is that we never have a live stream where we just say, oh yeah, the end game's fine, we left it how it is. Our goal is basically end game stuff, just accelerate, push, until PoE 2 comes out.
Well, the idea of like you guys do a live stream, you're like, didn't do anything.
Yeah. Remember how people liked the no character balance? We also did no content. So here's a league reset, new ladder, 8-second live stream. No, there's going to be a lot of stuff. And to be honest, we're really excited that we get to work on the end game every league. Because previously we kind of had this policy of just touch it once a year and touch it in a big way. And it kind of did feel stale. And if you were to ask me what one of our biggest mistakes was,
every league
we always come out with leagues, at least I find compelling. And they're generally pretty good. But when we leave the end game alone, people get to the end game, they've played the league, and then it's kind of just on faith that they keep playing, having some fun, but there isn't new stuff to do necessarily. So that's why we want to make sure there is new stuff to do when you get to the end for each of your characters all the time going forward.
I think it's been a huge reason for PoE's success. I'm excited to see a more consistent role of endgame changes. Especially, like, I think it gives the fact that PoE 2 is coming, we have space because we know, like, hey, the like early game experience is changing in a big way soon, so we can't just focus on the end game. Feels kind of nice. We have a question from a lot of people in chat, kind of translated, which you kind of touched on a little bit, but with changes to the Atlas trees and, like, for example, the monsters gain more life one, that would give builds like Detonate Dead a big buff. So has this been taken into consideration at all?
That's a good point. That specific point wasn't discussed directly, but we do understand that, yes, the tree has changed, and that will change what builds you want to play, but they will work the way you expect, which is the key thing, right? Like, we're not saying the right build for 317 is the right build for 318. The goal is that people have to think and pick their build. There's new challenges that are very hard. There's new Pinnacle bosses that are very hard.
I think I will play the same build.
Where you can juice up these map bosses to be very hard is also very hard. Your 317 builds may not be the right ones. But if you take a 317 build guide, it will function. There is no hidden nerf that prevents it from doing so. And there may be incidental stuff that goes much further than just the fact that monsters can get more life if you spec a Keystone and that makes your Detonate Deads better. It does scale DD, right? Yeah, okay, just checking that. But the builds from last time will work as the important part. We are not saying that the best build from last time is the best build from this time. So you must think before picking your build, but you can trust the build guides you read. And if there's something that's exciting, then play
A build
that
that can make max
Now
the
there's
mods, you know,
interesting, like
elemental,
refreshing kind of
reflection,
thing. I don't know, it
physical,
feels
reflection,
refreshing
everything.
this time around. This
one.
whole thing.
We'll break stuff in the future. Like we want a new meta in the future. We're not saying the builds stay this way forever. However, this time they do, and maybe, you know, if people like that, we might do it again in the future sometime if it makes sense.
Yeah, it's weird because I don't know, like I feel like I should be always hungering for the new changes to be excited about, but I don't know. Yeah, I feel like relieved a little bit that there's not like much balance changes this time. So maybe it's like an every now and then thing. It does seem right, but I guess we'll see how it feels after actually playing League. So those keystones that change the health and life, do they affect Pinnacle bosses or just maps?
They affect monsters in your maps, I believe. How does this technically work?
Yeah, so that terminology typically just refers to the maps on the Atlas and Pinnacle bosses.
Not the Pinnacle.
So yeah, in case Andrew wasn't loud, the maps on your Atlas are the ones affected by your Atlas tree when it's worded like that, and the Pinnacle bosses are typically not maps on the Atlas.
Yeah, so the things that do affect Pinnacle bosses are probably referred to them specifically.
Exactly.
Yeah, there is
that's
like
already like this
Uber fight, which is pretty clear that it makes it really hard. Oh, and here's the thing, by the way, random rant. What we learned from the Maelstrom of Chaos back in closed beta was that you have to have a cost for accessing in-game content. The reason why we made the map system where it consumes the map is so that there's a cost to trying. If you want to try a red tier map, it's going to cost you a lot, right? A whole red tier map. And the reason for this is because we found that players would play the hardest content of the game and then die and then be very angry and complain and quit. So typically, if you have high content, you have to gate it behind it being hard to get to, like the Simulacrum or blah, blah, blah. Problem is, here, the absolute hardest content is gated behind clicking a keystone. So there are people who are going to play the Uber fights who probably can't complete them. So it's not the case that you should allocate the keystone in order to have a normal Path of Exile experience. This is going to kill you, right? Like, you have to be really good at the normal Uber fight before the normal Pinnacle fights before it's worth allocating that keystone. So just get your regrets ready for unallocating that after you've seen how hard it is.
It'll put like one of those warning labels on it. You have to tear off first before you gain access to the keystone. Warning: this will probably kill you.
Yeah, we've had a long non-constructive arguments internally about whether this is technically Path of Exile's hardest content, where the answer is, of course it is, look at how hard it is, or I've come up with a contrived example of some other stuff. But as an example, you know, the Feared, for example, where it's got lots of bosses, it's probably on par with that, or a bit above, or a bit below, depending on the individual fight. But that's kind of the scale here. You don't just walk into that fight expecting it to be straightforward. And so these are certainly the hardest, like, solo boss fights with just, like, you know, 1 or 2 bosses in them.
Speaking of hard content, are the monsters from the new influence type seeing any changes? In particular, springing to my mind is the tentacle miscreations that appear about 80 of them at the same time and start shooting me all at the same time with tracking, heat-seeking bullets.
So we nerfed the Burning Ground from one of the Eater World's Alter mods that affects influence monsters. It was like a Burning Ground on death that's scale based on attack damage, and certain monsters had really high attack damage, so they had off-the-charts Burning Ground. That's been fixed. And we'll keep the tentacle miscreations as they are for you, Ziggy.
A lot of people already quitted.
No. Another Ziggy under the bus moment. Great, thanks.
He's not critical enough.
Okay. Oh no!
I don't know.
I've been giving the 10-minute warnings. All right, let's go. So Arch Nemesis modifiers are replacing old Nemesis and Bloodline modifiers. It had some really punitive and scary mechanics, like disabling Leech and combos that led to truly unkillable nightmares. I made a monster where I invited like the most OP people we could find into the map, and they couldn't kill it. However, we had control over making these monsters every time, but now it's random. And I know a lot of the time it's going to be like 2 or 3 mods, not 4 a lot of the time, but still,
Burning Ground
I need
is
reassurance,
bad.
Chris.
I
I'm
hate
very
it too.
scared.
So there's a lot of balance changes for the Arch Nemesis mods, and most of them are taking things that make sense in the context of Arch Nemesis and that don't make sense in the core game and fixing it. So for example, in Arch Nemesis, you're always fighting just one monster, and it's one that you can control what's on it, so you can pick. But in the core game, it could be several monsters with a mod near you. Like maybe you've got a magic pack, or maybe you've just hit multiple rares near each other. And so an example is the mods that make all the damage freeze or stun. And of course, that's a problem if there's just monsters all over the place that are doing like entirely freeze or entirely stuns on you. And so that stuff has been fixed. And like the Ice Prison mod disabled travel skills, whereas now it doesn't, because you kind of can't control when you run into it. So all of the stuff that required a little bit of foreshadowing is a bit less punitive now. We've also globally nerfed Grasping Vines, like, you know, not related to Arch Nemesis in particular, but certainly affects it. The other thing is that in Arch Nemesis, each mod had a multiplicative life bonus, and so there were some very, very, very high life rares. But when we've integrated it into the core game, they don't have such a bonus. Like we've kept the monster magic and rare life about the same as it was before, and it doesn't come from their mods. But to be clear, that doesn't mean that the rare monsters are easy. They were too easy before, we feel. They didn't, like, the basic idea is you play Path of Exile and you can kind of zone out and kill the monsters and it's fun and you have your power trip and everything's good. And then you run into, occasionally, a certain combination of rare mods that causes your character to have to pause and maybe do a different strategy. And that's how it's meant to be, that generally rare monsters are fine for you to kill, and sometimes they're hard. And people can try to argue they don't want a game where sometimes it gets hard, but the game we're making is one where sometimes it's hard, and that's done through rare monster mods, plus like things like act bosses and stuff that we can custom design. You could use the Diablo 2 example of like multiple shot lightning enchanted monsters, right? You can kill most of the rares and then you run into one of those, and you have to be very careful, at least back in the good old days. So we do have combinations here that are hard, and we feel that something like turning off leech for a specific monster is not the end of the world. There are other ways of having to recover life, and if this is a game where you cannot be permanently leeching and occasionally you need another way of getting life, we don't feel that that is too bad. But we will make sure
already 3 times. This guy is a fanboy of Diablo.
And there is a long list of changes. Actually, to clarify, there isn't a long list of changes. There's a lot of changes, but the patch notes basically just said we changed a bunch of stuff. It was getting completely out of hand to document it all, and it doesn't really matter because it doesn't affect your builds a lot. So we only covered important points, but the nitpicky detail I don't think is there in the patch notes for these changes.
Okay. We're going to speed through some more questions here.
Right.
Are there any new skill or support gems this league?
Oh, nice question.
No, but we may have made some awakened exceptional support gems and hidden them away behind really hard bosses that no one's actually going to be able to kill, and
like
has a very
light
good chance of dropping
awakened.
them.
I love that.
Okay.
Awakened exceptional support
Yeah.
It's perfect. Yeah. It reminds me of some of the really, really long old support gem names we had. Hopefully we get back to those. Those halcyon days of 18-word long support gem names. Okie dokie. Do we have any... Oh, yes. This was the question about hard mode. We're circling back to that.
Yes,
now.
hard mode.
Do we have any update on the previously teased hard mode?
So hard mode is still being worked on, but it is a second priority. And what that means is if a league is looking great and everything is fine and we're going to release it on schedule at high quality and everything's perfect, we work on hard mode. And if it is not going to be fine and we need to work on the league, we will of course 100% do that. So in no way are we letting hard mode stuff sacrifice any actual work from the core game. And this has meant that in some 3-month periods we just haven't touched it. And it's also tricky because it requires time from a lot of senior people, right? Like, Mark, for example, who is knee deep in like complicated Path of Exile 2 stuff right now, has to be dragged out of that to work on hard mode for bits and pieces that he needs to work on. It's tricky to find time. So we do have a schedule, and tentatively speaking, I would like to see it released by the end of the year. We want to make sure we do it right, of course, but that's what we're looking for. And because it's announced, we can be open with this, right? Like, it's not a secret. There's not going to be a big, like, there won't be a live stream where we say, surprise, hard mode's ready. It'll be the case of, remember that thing you've been testing for a while? Well, that's getting formally released with some prizes for a competition or whatever. So we will be very open about it.
Does that mean there might be some testing period before then? Maybe.
I think so, but not quite soon. Like, I'm thinking maybe a test in 3 months, maybe release in 6, right? But I'm usually wrong.
I would say Sentinel plus 1 leak, I would say explode.
All right. I'd like to discuss visual clarity in Path of Exile if we can for a little bit. So over the years, Path of Exile has become quite good looking, especially compared to some of those earlier screenshots and videos that are still floating around.
Thank you.
It especially feels that way when you're like leveling in early end game progression. During these times, like the monsters, the player, and the ability all work really well together to both communicate like the gameplay that the game has, but also the game world and the setting and the feeling and all that sort of stuff. However, when Path of Exile scales up, which it does, it scales up a lot these days, things rather quickly devolve into like a colorful blur where both like gameplay understanding is lost and also aesthetics are lost. Is this... What are your thoughts in general on visual clarity in Path of Exile currently, and is there any plans on how you might approach this in the future?
So we're not going to argue that the visual clarity is in a good place there, right? Like, it's really a matter of what we're doing about it, right? And the most extreme thing we could do would be to pause all other development and just sit there improving visual clarity for ages on every existing thing. And we actually do kind of have the ability to do that in the form of Path of Exile 2, because pretty much everything's getting redone. And so because they've learned all the lessons from 15 years of work on Path of Exile 1, they can make sure to design stuff in a way where when it scales up, it doesn't lose visual clarity when stacked with other stuff. And so the POE 2 team, who are working on the version we're all going to eventually be playing in a few years, they know this and are working for it. So the question is, what are we doing for POE 1? And
Who knows
any new stuff we make involving effects, we try very hard to make sure it has visual clarity. I hope you will find that when you're playing Sentinel, that the Sentinel effects are both relatively subtle but clear as to what is tagged and what rewards they're giving, and they stack with other things appropriately. Let us know if you feel that needs work. We make sure that new stuff that we make works well from a visual clarity point of view, and we do invest occasionally a bit of work in making sure that certain other old effects that are terrible from a visual clarity point of view are improved. But to be honest, a lot of the old POE 1 graphics get mostly thrown away when POE 2 comes out and replaces a lot of stuff. So, and by that I mean skills and so on. Like the campaign, yes, that will exist, but the campaign doesn't have visual clarity problems, and we will be playing with Path of Exile 2 skills on our Path of Exile 1 characters in the future.
Yeah, I think that's probably the problem. Like, a lot of the new stuff has been really good, but it kind of gets lost in the background of all the old stuff that really overwhelms it because it's...
Yeah.
to put it simply. Glad to hear that it's something you guys are considering pretty strongly then moving forwards. Look forward to seeing more progress in that. A lot of people have also been asking in chat about Loot 2.0 as well. I know we've had like little testers or little tastes of some of that change. Lessening. Where are we at in terms of like Loot 2.0?
There's a lot of axes here, right? So the first thing is hard mode is going to be good for people that really want no clutter. Like if they really just want it so that items are special when they find each one, they go play that. It's kind of perfect. The second thing is we have been doing things like reducing the number of times you find currency item and increasing the stack sizes, basically working towards decluttering.
That's good.
We also had some experimentative changes related to decluttering, which were deployed months ago that no one has noticed yet, which is good. That means that it hasn't had an effect on the actual economy, and it hasn't had an effect on item drops to the point where people will notice, and will gradually continue to tweak that. It's mostly in the form of culling items that would never be picked up. And so, the better we get at that, the better it is. I just don't want players to feel that we're culling items that are valuable to them, because we're really trying very hard not to. And the basic goal is, I know we're going over time, but at the end of the day, there are two ways to declutter, right? Way number one is to leave the spam of rares and uniques that people are used to, right? This really rewarding thing where there's quite a lot of item dilution. Leave that in place because people like it, and to reduce clutter of other things, in which case at the end of the day, it's a big pile of yellow items on the ground. And I think we'd be lynched if we did a solution other than that. Or to actually solve itemization issues with the game and say, look, rares should be special, blah, blah, blah. And that's what hard mode's for, right? We get it. A lot of people like the reward spam. And so because of hard mode, there will be a way where rewards are very, very, very precious, and they can play there if they want, in my opinion, superior experience. But baseline PoE will probably still not have substantial drop nerfs, at least during PoE 1. And then, of course, with
the
PoE 2,
cluttering is actually
knowing what players like, but also
that,
knowing how that game works.
Less drops.
Awesome. Well, I've been giving the time warning quite aggressively, but just kidding.
Like I say, that 17 Scroll of Wisdoms are not dropping, but 17 in one. That you click on one and you loot the 17, and not that you have to click 17 times.
All right.
Like 1 year ago, you had to. For example. Exactly. And less shit dropping. That was it with the reveal, my friends. In my opinion, if you ask me, as I said already, I'm very happy about the changes that they are making to the game, that the end game I can choose what I want to farm. I have much more freedom to that. I really like that, because so I don't have to do, for example, I say Legion encounters because I hate them. Others, they like that. They can farm than that, So I can say, okay, I want less of, or I don't want any Legion encounter. But for that, I want more chances to get the others. And so I'm very happy about that. For real, I like this. But I think that the league mechanic itself, it's not gonna be good. I tell you, that's my that's my opinion. I don't think the league mechanic is gonna be great. If people didn't like this league mechanic, this one, like the Arch Nemesis, I think they will even be less happy with the league mechanic now. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. But I mean, the quality of life, yeah, we'll see. And those two that they have presented are not bad. I hope some more are gonna come. But yeah, I mean, this is like the patch notes. I think we will not go into it. I mean, the Atlas Keystones are also amazing. The one with the fragments. The one with the fragments is like really great, that I can like take the fragments out. So because I'm really a lazy player, you know, I don't like to be always like juicing my maps. That's why I didn't juice all the time. I have plenty of fragments, plenty of scarabs that are gonna go to standard, because I'm so lazy. I don't want to like choose which one to take to farm maps. I just want to put my map in and just go on. I mean, I put my sextants on it, I rare it, and if the mods are right and the quality and I mean the quantity is right on the rarity, I just go in, you know. And now you can like just disable that and get 50% more chances to encounter some other stuff. It was a keystone that I really welcome, and yeah, I like that. You know, I hate scarabs, you know. Yeah, I mean, there is a delay, yeah, my friends. But as I said, I'm very happy about the changes that they are making. And what I really love also is that they are not nerfing and nor buffing nothing. You know, I really like it. I know players like the film that like to experiment with a lot of stuff. He's very disappointed with this news, but I like it because, I mean, it feels like, okay, I can go on with what I was playing, or at least that I know what I am going into. You know, until now it was always a surprise. Is this build gonna work? Is it not gonna work? And so on. Now there is no surprise. I really welcome this, you know. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it, like for sure, but I'm a bit disappointed by the reveal. Why? Because I was expecting more about POE 2, because they told that they would talk about POE 2 today, yeah, and nothing. ZGD, instead of, come on bro, come on, tell us what is tell us something about POE 2, come on, you know, like talking a bit more, you know, like Chris Wilson said, yeah, it's a number, and ZGD said, okay, it's okay, I don't want to piss you know, I don't want you to get pissed. No, you have to be a bit like more consistent on your questioning. You have to say, yes, okay, you don't want to tell when the POE 2, but give us some other, let's say like something, you know, that we are happy. Tell us about POE 2 something, you know. But yeah, the current leak was a bit overwhelming. It obligated you to stop and check combos for the pieces. Yeah, that's true. I am not happy about league mechanics that you have to stop your progression to encounter the league mechanic. I love to go into your map, go on, and then at some point the league mechanic is striking in and you can go on. You know, I like that. That's why I'm not so happy with Legion. First of all, you have to stop, you have to farm all the mobs, then they spawn, then you have to kill them again, and most of the time the rewards are bad on the Legion. There are people saying, no, you are farming them wrongly. Okay, but it's very underwhelming. Also the same like Expedition. I didn't like it for that, but I mean, the rewardings are really great about it, you know, that's why, okay, you know, but I like the one that you, I think it was Scourge League. I liked it because you could go on, then you clicked on your Scourge, you encountered the Scourging, you know, and then you could go on and so on and so on. So I like those, you know, where you don't have to stop. Exactly, the Scourge mobs were amazing, and then at some point you had 200% quantity, bro. It was amazing, you know. You're welcome, Quick. But as I said, that's my opinion about it. As I said, in short terms, the changes to the core game, amazing. Okay, amazing. But the league mechanic, I could be wrong. Maybe we will play it and I'm gonna say, wow, how nice is this? But I don't think, my friends. I think it's gonna be one that people are just gonna say, nah, it's gonna be a very bad league in terms of league mechanic. Tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe with group play, if you combine all of the Sentinels together, you can make like some crazy stuff. But yeah. So my friends, was it with the expansion? We are gonna go on. I have not much to say. It was an amazing reveal. 1 hour and 30 minutes of this. But let's go. So what